Welcome to the Adventures of the Monad. Today's presentation will examine the relationship between clairvoyance and time and space. 4 methods allow one to observe events at a distance. 1. Using an emotional current. This method is analogous to the magnetization of a bar of steel and consists of what may be called polarization by an effort of will. In this process, several parallel lines of emotional atoms are generated from the observer to the scene they wish to observe. All the atoms are held with their axes rigidly parallel, forming a temporary tube along which the clairvoyant may look. The line is liable to be disarranged or even destroyed by any sufficiently strong emotional current that crosses its path. This, however, seldom happens. The line is formed either by the transmission of energy from particle to particle or by the use of force from a higher plane, which acts upon the whole line simultaneously. The latter method implies far more significant development, involving the knowledge of and power to use forces of a considerably higher level. Notice that we are talking about a physical instrument being built, which allows the viewer to see into the distance. When you use a telescope to see a distant object, it is the telescope that facilitates the process. It is straightforward for a non-Hylozoician to imagine all sorts of astral powers that may facilitate remote viewing. The truth is that there is only one power, the power of matter. A person who could make a line in this way would not, for their own use, need such a line at all because they could see far more wholly and efficiently utilizing a higher faculty. But this faculty is still relying on the matter of that plane in some manner. The current or tube may be formed quite unconsciously and unintentionally and is often the result of a strong thought or emotion projected from one end or the other, either from the seer or from the person seen. If 2 people are united by strong affection, a relatively steady stream of mutual thought is constantly flowing between them, and some sudden need or desire on the part of one of them may induce this stream temporarily with the polarizing power needed to create the emotional telescope. The view obtained by this means is not unlike that seen through a telescope. Human figures, for example, would usually appear very small but perfectly clear. Sometimes, but not usually, it is possible to hear and see by this method. The method has distinct limitations, as the emotional telescope reveals the scene from one direction only and has a limited and particular field of view. Emotional sight directed along such a tube is limited as physical sight would be under similar circumstances. This type of clairvoyance may be greatly facilitated by using a physical object as a starting point, a focus for willpower. A ball of crystal is the most common and effective of such foci. Due to its peculiar arrangement of tertiary matter, it also possesses qualities that stimulate psychic faculty. Other objects are also used for the same purpose, such as a cup, a mirror, a pool of ink, as in Egypt and India, a drop of blood, used among the Maoris of New Zealand, a bowl of water, used by Native Americans, a pond, used by Romans and some Africans, water in a glass bowl, used in Fez in Morocco, or almost any polished surface, or, on the other hand, a completely black surface produced by a handful of powdered charcoal in a saucer. Some can determine what they see by their will. That is to say, they can point their telescope as they wish, but the great majority form a random tube and see whatever happens to present itself at the end of it. Some psychics can use the tube method only under the influence of mesmerism. There are two varieties of such psychics. 1, those who can make the tube for themselves, and 2, those who look through a tube made by the mesmerizer. Occasionally, though rarely, magnification is also possible when employing the tube, though in these cases it is probable that an altogether new power is beginning to dawn. 2. By the projection of a thought form. This method involves projecting a mental image of oneself, around which emotional matter is also drawn. A connection needs to be developed to the mental picture, so that what it sees is relayed to you. The form thus acts as an outpost of the consciousness of the seer. Such impressions would be transmitted to the thinker by sympathetic vibration. In a perfect case, the seer can see almost as well as if they stood in the place of the thought form. In this method, shifting the viewpoint, if desired, is possible. Several militaries have experimented with this type of clairvoyance, achieving good results. This method was also used in the Second World War to visit map rooms and glean information about troop and ship movements. Clairvoyance had to be posted on the emotional plane to counter this clandestine observation and block such incursions. Clairaudience is less frequently associated with this type of clairvoyance than with the first type. The moment the thought's intent fails, the whole vision is gone, and it will be necessary to construct a fresh thought form before it can be resumed. This type of clairvoyance is rarer than the first because of the mental control required and the finer nature of the forces employed. It is tedious except for relatively short distances. 3. By traveling in the emotional body, either in sleep or trance. This process has already been described in previous presentations. This method was also preferred in the Second World War, as it was more reliable and distance was not an issue. Again, the other side had to post clairvoyance to intercept the opposing clairvoyance from entering the classified area. How do you convince someone that an invisible visitor is stealing all their secrets? With great difficulty. What swung it was the undeniable fact that intelligence was being compromised, and this was, however tenuous, a plausible explanation. When accepted, clairvoyance could eliminate the loss of this intelligence, leaving the military to scratch their heads and ponder the implications. 4. By traveling in the mental body. In this case, the emotional body is left behind with the physical, and if one desires to show oneself on the emotional plane, a temporary emotional body or Maya Varupa is formed, as has been previously described. Your monad must be focused in your 47-4 permanent molecule to pull off that trick. It is also possible to obtain information regarding events at a distance by invoking or evoking an emotional entity such as a nature spirit and inducing or compelling that spirit to undertake the investigation. Of course, this is not clairvoyance, but magic, black magic to be precise. In order to find a person on the emotional plane, one must put oneself in rapport with them. A clue such as a photograph, a letter written by them, or an object that belonged to them helps locate the person. The operator then sounds out the person's keynote, and an immediate response will be forthcoming if the person sought is on the emotional plane. This keynote of the person on the emotional plane is an average tone that emerges from all the different vibrations that are habitual to their emotional body. There is also a similar average tone for each person's mental and other bodies, all the keynotes together forming the person's chord, or mystic chord as it is often called. The trained seer attunes their vehicle for a moment precisely to the person's note, and then, by an effort of will, sends forth its sound. Wherever in the three worlds a person's thought may be, an instant response is evoked from them. This response is at once visible to the seer, so that they can form a magnetic line of connection with the person. Another form of clairvoyance enables a seer to perceive events that have happened in the past. There are many degrees of this power, from the trained person who can consult the Akashic records for themselves at will, to the person who gets occasional glimpses only. Usually, the psychrometer needs an object physically connected with the scene in the past that they wish to see, or of course, they may use a crystal or other object as their focus. The Akashic record represents the divine memory which has been discussed previously. The records seen on the emotional plane are a reflection of a reflection from a much higher plane, and are consequently imperfect, fragmentary in the extreme, and often seriously distorted. They have been compared to the reflection on a water surface ruffled by wind. On the mental plane, the records are complete and accurate and can be read with exactitude. But this demands faculties linked to the mental plane. Actually, as an aside, the real and true records, the Akashic records, are kept on plane 44. But that's getting a bit technical. In the next presentation, we will examine our invisible helpers. That is a very interesting topic. Thank you.